Good morning, I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, underwater. At least 9 million Americans are under flood alerts, and the wet weather from this slow-moving system is not over yet. 24 hours of record rain led to deadly flooding in Texas. Drivers trapped, homes damaged, and travel disrupted. This morning, more parts of the South are now facing the threat of flooding, where the storm is moving, and when this region could finally get a break from the rain. Decision day. Voters in two of the nation's most populous states head to the polls in key primary races. From the Florida governor's race to major redistricting shakeups in New York, we're going to break down the races to watch and what this could all mean for the November election. Plus, we'll take a closer look at how former President Trump and the Supreme Court's decision on abortion are all shaping this primary day. One-on-one. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona joins us live on Morning News Now. We're going to ask him about the new pressures kids are facing as they head back to the classroom amid a nationwide teacher shortage. Plus, the question on a lot of minds, what about student loans? The moratorium ends next week, so will borrowers have to start paying again? Will they get any relief? We're going to ask him later this hour. Plus, a Forever Home nonprofit is taking to the skies to help animals in need. We're going to introduce you to the pilots who are saving the lives of hundreds of animals and helping them find new homes. Excited to bring you that story. We actually followed along on one mission from New York's Long Island all the way down to Beaumont, Texas, and back,
wow.
saving 26 dogs.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I can't wait to see it. You'll bring us that a little bit later.
2 puppy pictures coming ahead. We're going to begin this hour with that record-breaking torrential rain that has battered Texas and other southern states over the last 24 hours.
This morning, millions of Americans across that region are waking up to flood alerts, all part of the same system that drenched the Dallas area. Look at the full weather forecast from meteorologist Michelle Grossman in just a moment. But before that, let's get the latest from NBC's Sam Brock in Austin.
Well, in Texas, they've been clamoring for rain for months, but nobody expected what they have just received. In the Dallas area, more than 15 inches of rain over a 24-hour period. For context, in the 8 months prior to that, under 14 inches. We're here in Austin. Over my shoulder here is the Shoal Creek. Looks calm right now. It was so gushing yesterday. It came all the way up past its banks to the middle of this railing, flooding businesses, spilling out onto the streets. There was about 2 to 3 inches of rain per hour at one point, all part of a system that now is proved to be deadly.
Images of Texans wading through waist-high water and hundreds of rescues, a stark contrast to the blistering heat and devastating drought punishing the state for months. Overnight, eastern Texas and Louisiana slammed with more heavy rain and flash floods. Those same thunderstorms drenching the Dallas-Fort Worth area just 24 hours earlier, dropping more than 14 inches of rain, more precipitation than the area has seen in the previous 8 months. The deluge in Dallas also claiming a life. A 60-year-old woman on the phone with family when her car was swept away. She was found hours later once the water receded. Abandoned cars, almost completely submerged. First responders racing to reach people, among them families and children.
I had to kick this door open just to get out the car.
One woman posting on Instagram from Dallas saying the water was creeping up around her apartment.
It's really bad. It's really bad. Like, it's coming. It's past my balcony. I don't know what to do.
The region still haunted by this scary scene. People struggling to survive as water inundated Interstate 30. While in Austin, local businesses and motorists coming face to face with flooding and dangerous commutes. The rain also throwing a wrench into travel plans, canceling hundreds of flights and delaying more than half of all departures at DFW. It's a painful byproduct of a critical rainfall, breaking a 67-day-long streak with no water in parts of the Lone Star State. But some Texans getting more than they bargained for.
You can see what the water did inside this home.
Floodwaters soaking homes and rearranging furniture.
It looked like a roaring rapid river. I had never experienced that before.
A new normal with extreme rain events, the result of climate change. Eastern Kentucky, Southeast Illinois, Death Valley, and now the Dallas area, all drenched by once-in-a-thousand-year floods just in the past few weeks.
And just how bad was it in Texas? A record for the wettest hour of all time for Dallas and Austin that had held for 70 years. Broken in both places, almost 3 inches in an hour here in Austin, just over 3 inches in Dallas. Dallas County issuing a disaster declaration to get the wheels moving, to try to get federal and state aid for victims. In Austin, Sam Brock, NBC News.
So when could the South see some relief from the rain?
Michelle Grossman is back with us with the forecast, maybe to answer that question with a big flash flood risk map behind her. Hey, Michelle.
I know. Hi there, guys. It's going to take a while. This is a very slow-moving system. It's the same system that brought the rain yesterday. We're going to see it over the next couple of days. Let's take a look at what we expect for today and then over the next couple of days as well. So this is our flash flood risk. This is where we're expecting flash flooding today. The likeliest spot is in the pink here. So Alexandria, east of Shreveport, Jackson, Mississippi, portions of Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, even in Alabama, eastern Texas. That's where we're expecting some flash flooding as well. But notice it extends all the way into portions of central Texas. And we're looking at the southwest, too, looking at the chance for some flash flooding as well. So for today, we're looking at those flooding risks. Once again, we have that really slow-moving system. It's nearly stationary. So we're going to see storms develop along this once again. Lots of moisture. It's pulling moisture off the Gulf, and that's part of the bad news. So as we go throughout the day, we're going to be watching this. We're going to be watching it on Wednesday as well. And then as we go throughout tomorrow, we're going to really start to warm up in the northeast. Scattered storms once again in the southwest. That monsoon system still working hard. And we're looking at storms in the northern plains as well. So flash flooding in tonight. We do have 9 million people at risk this morning. We're going to see those numbers grow probably as we go throughout the day, stretching from southern Texas into portions of Louisiana, southern Arkansas, also Mississippi. I do think this will stretch into Alabama as we go throughout today into tomorrow. So where you see the green here, that's where our flood watch is in effect. We're going to see flash flood warnings in effect as well. This is why we're looking at heavy rain, where you see those brighter colors, those reds, those yellows, oranges. That's where we're seeing torrential downpours, and that's what they are. We're going to see ponding once again. We're going to see cars underwater. We're going to see images like what we saw. Hopefully not quite as severe, but still seeing some very, very heavy rain, especially in southern Arkansas into portions of Louisiana, Mississippi. Here's to set up an area of low pressure. It's moving very slowly off to the east, and it will continue to move slowly tomorrow as well. We're seeing that threat for flooding in Louisiana, also Mississippi. And then we're going to see storms in the southeast on Wednesday. High rainfall rates, we're talking 2 to 3 inches per hour. And also, adding to those areas of flooding as well. So your rainfall forecast, generally 2 to 4 inches, but we could see locally up to 4, maybe 6, even locally higher amounts. Where you see that red there, that's going to be your highest amount for some rainfall totals. Now, we do have rain, cold air. We have clouds, we have showers, we have storms. Those are keeping the temperatures down in this area, anywhere from 5 up to 15 degrees below what is typical for this time of year. So into the 70s and 80s for late August. That will hold true tomorrow, too, because we're going to keep those clouds and storms in place tomorrow. And then as we go throughout the late week, we're going to start to warm it up once again in the Northeast. I know, Savannah, you mentioned that humidity today. It's rough and it's warm.
My goodness.
But we're going to see those temperatures climbing pretty high by the later part of the week. Temperatures into the upper 80s and also 90s in portions of Memphis. So summer's not over. August is not over. We had a little break. I thought, I feel like we had a break in the Northeast, but it's going to warm up again.
Oh, right, here we go.
Even this morning, I mean, when I got in my car at 5 in the morning, the humidity?
Gross.
Oh, yes, it really is gross.
Steamy. All right. Thank you, Michelle.
My glasses fogging up everywhere. I know.
All right, this morning, there are new developments in the FBI search of former President Donald Trump's Florida home. Overnight, a report surfaced on the number of classified documents that were in the former president's possession and how that compelled the Justice Department to act.
This all comes as voters in 2 of the country's biggest states head to the polls for primary elections, with the former president and national issues like abortion and the economy playing an outsized role. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Kristen Walker has more.
This morning, a new twist in the battle between former President Donald Trump and the federal government over those classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Overnight, the New York Times reporting, according to multiple people briefed on the matter, that the government has recovered more than 300 total documents with classified markings from Mr. Trump since he left office, adding that federal officials became alarmed after the National Archives recovered over 150 classified documents from Mr. Trump in January. The Times writes the former president was personally involved with the documents, going through the boxes himself in late 2021. NBC News has reached out to federal authorities and the Trump team and has not heard back. It comes after Mr. Trump's legal team fired back against the FBI 2 weeks after the search, requesting an independent legal professional oversee the handling of the documents and asking the Justice Department to stop the review. And this fight is playing out during a heated primary election season season. This morning, a fired-up electorate will head to the polls in key states where Mr. Trump looms large.
We know that Donald Trump is the greatest threat to our national security.
In Florida, the two candidates battling it out to take on Republican governor and potential presidential hopeful Ron DeSantis, former Republican governor turned Democratic Congressman Charlie Crist, and the state's agriculture commissioner Nikki Fried. Fried focusing on one of the biggest issues, abortion, after Roe v. Wade was overturned. Crist aiming to make the case he's the stronger candidate to take on DeSantis.
That's the difference. Electability and experience. I offer both.
And in New York, a fierce battle between Carolyn Maloney and Jerry Nadler. Both have been in Congress since 1992, and they're duking it out over who is more progressive. But the 2024 presidential race always in the background. Maloney made waves when she was asked whether President Biden should run again.
When you run, or if you run, I will be there 100%.
That was Kristen Walker reporting. Our thanks to Kristen. And turning now to the future of the CDC. Following an internal review, Director Rochelle Walensky announced a major reset to the way the agency operates. That includes staffing and the speed of data releases to the public. The move comes as the agency comes under fire for its delayed response to monkeypox and, of course, COVID. Walensky addressed the mistakes earlier on the Today Show. Here's a little bit of what she had to say.
And I think we need to recognize that in our big moment, our performance didn't reliably meet the expectations of this country. And that's exactly why I called for this reset, why I called for this review. We have some extraordinary people at the CDC who are often up all night to protect America's health. And my goal really, as we hit this reset, was to have a new public health action-oriented culture that really emphasizes, as you said, accountability, that emphasizes collaboration with our public health partners across the country, communication to the American public, and timeliness with our information to the American public. Yeah, there are several things that we're doing even actively right now. We're putting more information out in real time before it's gone through full peer review, but really where we believe this information is reliable and actionable right now.
I'm hearing some of the same complaints about monkeypox that we heard about COVID-19, testing, vaccines, slow response. What do you say to people who say, like, I feel like I've seen this movie before?
You know, these are two very different infections. One is a respiratory infection. One is an infection that is transmitted through skin-to-skin contact. What is interestingly the same about them is that these are two infections. COVID, we knew little about scientifically. We know a lot more about monkeypox. But this is something most of America, most clinicians, most physicians, most of the community had really never heard of either. And so we have a lot of education, have had a lot of education to do on both of the accounts. We at CDC have had similar challenges with our ability to see the data. There are other things that I think we could really use congressional help for. For example, some of our authorities within the agency, our ability to pay overtime for our human resource authorities, for data to come in, as has been mentioned before, we can't compel data to come in from the states. When we don't see those data, it's very hard for us to act upon them, and even for us to quickly mobilize contracts during times of emergency. So all of these things are on the table as we're really moving to better the agency and to realize their full potential.
Dr. Walensky also talked about her boss, Dr. Fauci's recent announcement that he's stepping down from the organization, saying, quote, those will be very big shoes to fill. Now, this morning, there's some good news for families struggling with those sky-high grocery bills and gas prices. The cost for a lot of these staples is finally coming down, in some cases actually way down. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello joins us now for more on some of this little bit of good news. Hey, Tom, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. So we've been talking about this for a long time, right? Skyrocketing prices, rising interest rates. Increasingly, economists think maybe inflation peaked earlier this summer. Prices going down already for gas, for food, for example, for air travel after Labor Day. And so now we've been talking to experts, what you should buy now, where you're finding deals, and maybe the purchases you should put off, given this volatile economy.
This morning, much needed relief for families from the skyrocketing cost of living, with fresh evidence that inflation may have peaked earlier this summer. Though prices are still a lot higher than a year ago, there is a silver lining with many new deals available.
Some of the areas that we're really seeing some good bargains for consumers right now as that demand falls off or the supply picks up, I would say clothing, apparel, footwear, consumer electronics, personal computers, smartphones.
And there's more good news at the grocery store where prices are coming down for many key staples. So far in August, the price of boneless, skinless chicken breasts down nearly 24%. The cost of eggs dropping 60%. Milk and butter also cheaper, as are prices for hot dogs and tomatoes. The sky-high cost of travel is also coming down. Gasoline now at $3.90 a gallon nationally, down from $5.01 in June. And airfares expected to drop 50% after Labor Day. Hotel and car rental rates also slowly coming down. In this volatile economy, consumers are also changing their habits, spending less and trying to save more. One survey found nearly half have cut back on discretionary purchases. 35% putting away more money for emergencies, and 19% saving more for retirement.
It's going to be important for folks to make financial decisions that give them some flexibility and freedom to withstand all these future uncertainties.
Consumer experts say if you're in the market for a new car, buying a used one may make better sense right now. Supply chain delays mean new car inventories are still super low and dealer prices are sky high, while inventories for used cars are going up and prices are starting to fall. As inflation seems to be plateauing, experts say one of the best money-saving tips involves your credit cards. If you carry credit card debt, it's going to cost you more as interest rates continue to rise, sending your balances even higher. It's why experts recommend paying off your card balances in full every month.
To the extent that they can avoid those fees, that's money that they're essentially saving.
Importantly here, 1 month is not a trend to make. We need to make that point. A lot of economists say it looks like we could still be headed into a recession next year. 3/4 of the economists polled think a recession is likely. Nonetheless, we're going to be watching these numbers closely. What do the August numbers look like come next month? And of course, we're expecting the Fed to raise rates again next month, maybe by 3/4 of a point. Guys, back to you.
All right, Tom Costello, thank you so much. Coming up on Morning News Now, a grim discovery. Divers have found what police believe is the body of a missing California teenager. The latest on the weeks-long investigation and the group of volunteer divers who helped find the teen's car. That's next. We're back with new details this morning in the search for a missing California teenager. A volunteer group of divers say they found her car underwater, along with human remains near where she was last seen. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson joins us now with more on the discovery and how this team made this discovery. Hey, Steve, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. Officials say it is too soon to determine a cause of death or whether or not foul play or drugs were involved. But the investigation is able to move forward thanks in part to that team of volunteer divers who made that discovery just as the trail was starting to grow cold.
This morning, after more than a dozen agencies searched for missing teen Kylie Rodney since early August, volunteers stepping in to help solve the mystery.
We believe it is our missing person. We have not been able to positively identify, but it's more than likely.
The volunteer scuba team Adventures with Purpose discovered the 16-year-old's SUV overturned in Lake Prosser in just 14 feet of water, 55 feet offshore, near the campground where she was last seen.
I had to make several passes over it to kind of verify what I was seeing.
Divers Nick Wren and Doug Bishop were able to locate the vehicle shortly after they began combing the lake after 2 weeks of searching by law enforcement.
They couldn't find anything. What is so different about the techniques that you use?
Our sonar technology is not different than what they had. It's the ability to manipulate it.
The 16-year-old disappeared from a party with hundreds of other kids at a Lake Tahoe area campground in the early hours of August 6th.
We're so scared and we miss her so much and we love her so much.
Desperate for answers, Kylie's extended family reached out to the volunteer scuba sleuths. The group has a long track record of helping solve missing persons cases.
We deal with families all over the country, and we're solving cases that are 20, 30 years old.
Rodney's father was at the lake when the car and body were discovered.
That's not a moment that is easy. They have a 16-year-old daughter that's never coming home again.
What is so important about the work that you do?
To be able to be in the position to help families and utilize those skills that we have it's an honor, and that's our purpose.
Her family asking for privacy, writing, "Kylie will surely remain with us, even though we will not get her back."
So an autopsy is scheduled for today with a toxicology report to follow in the coming weeks. Her disappearance, of course, will remain an active investigation with the FBI assisting and the vehicle itself playing a large part as authorities will work to recover the car's data. Savannah.
Right. Steve Patterson, fascinating look there. Thank you so much. Overseas now, and big changes are in the works for some members of the royal family. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis will soon be the new kids on the block as the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge announced their plans to move their family out of London in an effort to give the kids a more normal family life. NBC News foreign correspondent Kelly Kobaya joins us now from Kensington Palace in London. Hey, Kelly, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Savannah. Yeah, this has been described, Kensington Palace behind me, as a fishbowl for the royal family. And they really did want that little bit more privacy, especially for the kids. Their new home is only about 20 miles away, but it is a world apart. It's far from the tourists and the cameras, with a lot of space for the kids to play. It's been a breakthrough year for the Cambridge children. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis in public more than ever, on the world stage at the Queen's Jubilee, and even going to work with their parents. But now, Prince William and Kate making a big change, moving their young family to Adelaide Cottage, the 4-bedroom historic home on the Queen's estate in Windsor, just half a mile from the Queen's residence. Their kids all going to the private Lambrook School, set in 52 acres of countryside.
The children will be able to enjoy it without any prying eyes or photographers being there or members of the public being able to see them.
A royal source telling the Press Association the move is for the children, so they can have as normal a life as possible. It keeps Prince William, second in line to the throne, close to his grandmother, the Queen, now 96, and handing over more of her duties.
He's still learning so much from her. We know that they are constantly in touch with each other. And I think he felt strongly that he wanted to physically be near the Queen at Windsor Castle.
Their new home, a stone's throw from Prince Harry and Meghan's Frogmore Cottage. They're returning to Britain next month for the first time since the Jubilee. But it's not clear if the two families will meet up. The brothers' relationship still strained 25 years after their mother, Princess Diana's death. Right now, the Queen is at her summer residence in Scotland, Balmoral, but we understand that she will be back here in England in early September to see in a new Prime Minister. Both Prince William and Prince Harry will both be here as well. So, Savannah, it could be the perfect opportunity for a get-together for both of them and Granny. Wow. Savannah, but we'll have to see, of course.
Yeah.
Kelly making some predictions there.
Yeah,
Thank you, Kelly.
Coming up, parents in Uvalde, Texas are preparing to send their kids back to school. It's only been a few months since the mass shooting at Robb Elementary, and there are still a lot of questions. Coming up, one Uvalde parent joins us with the changes he wants to see.
Plus, dozens of countries have elected a female leader, but the U.S. is still not one of them. What will it take to elect a female as U.S. president? A familiar face on Morning News Now, Ali Vitale, joins us next with her new book, taking a deep dive on the issue.
Welcome back. Uvalde parents are preparing to send their kids back to school just months after 19 children and 2 adults were killed in a mass shooting at Robb Elementary. But the community is still dealing with fallout from the tragedy, including how to hold top officials accountable for their actions.
In a school board hearing last night, parents filed their grievances with Superintendent Hal Harrell, with some calling for his resignation. Others expressed concern over new security protocols put in place for the new school year. Several additional hearings are scheduled before classes begin there on September 6th.
Adam Martinez is one of the parents who filed a grievance at last night's board meeting, and he joins us now. Adam, good morning. Thank you so much for your time and for talking through this, especially while, of course, your community is still grieving. We appreciate it. I'd love to start with that hearing and what prompted you to file this grievance. Were you able to speak with the board or the school superintendent, and did you get any answers you were looking for?
So what prompted it is that there's a lot of complaints either on social media or the families that reach out to me or me in general that had to experience this and the lack of security that was there. So in order to really make it serious, you have to sometimes put it in writing. We forget that there's systems in place. So there's a system in place for this. And so when that House committee report came out, I kind of used that to go ahead and file that grievance and kind of highlight. So when I talked to the board, I did have an opportunity to talk to the board, and Dr. Harrell was also in attendance. And I kind of just went through that House committee report. There was a lot of failures everywhere, but it was clear that there was some administrative failures. So I went through there. I was able to name some different government codes or policies through the Texas Education Agency that they failed on. And so I kind of just went line by line, talking to them about that.
Adam, I know you wrote on your grievance form that your kids are now afraid to go back to school because they don't feel safe inside the classroom. In your mind, do any of the district's new safety measures ease those fears? What are you hearing from your kids?
You know, at first, by looking at the fencing and then talking with Mr. Miller, he's the student services director. We did a protest over there when the 10th day of the grievance was up and they hadn't called us. So we went over there. I demanded to speak with Dr. Harrell. He was in a meeting, so I was able to talk to Mr. Miller, and he assured me that there was going to be more police officers there. So, and the fencing was up, right, in some of these areas. So when I talked to my son, I was trying to be positive because we want him to go back to school. He basically just said that it doesn't matter if there's fencing or it doesn't matter how many cops are there. They're not going to go in. They're too scared. You know, they're too scared to protect us. They're going to try to protect themselves.
Just heartbreaking. Actually, Adam, on that vein, I want to ask you about District Police Chief Pete Arredondo. The school board is expected to determine his future tomorrow. Do you plan to attend that hearing? And more importantly, what are you hoping to see? What does accountability look like to you?
Termination, basically. They need to terminate him, and they should have done it a long time ago. But I think with all the pressure that we've been putting on them, I'm hoping that they actually do it. I mean, you should see the reaction from the parents, especially yesterday, after they gave everybody 1 minute to talk. I think they gave 5 people 1 minute to talk. It's hard to make any type of point when you're talking for only 1 minute. So that's really suppressing us. And then when the parents were there waiting for
All right, Adam, I believe we're having some technical issues and can't hear you right now, but we want to thank you for taking time to join us this morning, and we're continuing to think of your family and your community.
Absolutely. Adam, thank you so much.
All right, more than 50 countries have had women as their top leaders in the past half century, and as we know, the United States is not one of them.
Yeah, so what will it take for women to finally break through the glass ceiling and into the White House? That is the main question in Electable, a new book by NBC's very own Capitol Hill correspondent, our very good friend, Ali Vitale.
And Ali joins us now to talk about her new book, which is out today. Ali, good morning. Congratulations. We are so excited for you. I mean, we just want to talk about what you have learned. I bet you could fill a whole book with what you've learned. Why hasn't the U.S. elected a female president?
Yeah, look, I mean, Joe, I wish I could tell you that the simple answer is misogyny, but this would be a much shorter book if that were the only answer to this question. And so what my goal was here is to put this through the lens of the 2020 Democratic primary, where we had more women run in that field than ever before, 6 of them running there, and to filter those moments that I reported on and lived in real time through a gender lens that we don't often get to apply in real time as we're reporting for platforms like this one. What my goal was then in doing that was to sort of match the feelings with facts, the idea that we feel like it's different for women candidates, that the playing field is unequal. But the facts and the data and the research that I found, as well as the interviews that I got to do with experts, operatives, but also the candidates themselves, in many cases, all of it bears out that there are inequities to this system. And part of it is just calling it out, drawing attention to it, and that can disrupt the narrative in real time, which is frankly my hope as we go into a midterm election cycle and then another presidential cycle, where I do hope and think we're going to see female candidates running.
Allie, you spent, as you just said, a lot of time with women who ran to be the president in 2020. I mean, that was your life. We all saw you. Our viewers here on this show saw that. What did they tell you about their own campaigns and the challenges women face when running for any leadership position in general?
Look, I was stunned by the ways that these conversations were happening as we were out on the campaign trail, and then they were continuing after as I was writing the book. I was lucky enough that people like Senators Klobuchar and Warren and Gillibrand gave me their time and their candor, and Secretary Clinton as well, in talking about what it means to be a candidate in this environment where you're vying for a job that no woman has ever done before. Now what we end up with is, with Kamala Harris in the vice presidency, a woman who's been elevated to the top position, closer than ever to the Oval Office, but still not elected to that space. And that's something that we toy with a lot in the book, this idea that we are making progress, but that we are not electing women outright for this job, at least not yet. And that's something that in my conversations with Warren and Klobuchar and Clinton, they all say they think we are going to get there. But in 2020, the key theme, as I talked to voters, and you guys found this too, is that they wanted to be risk averse. For Democrats especially, the top goal was just, can someone beat Donald Trump? Because Hillary Clinton had lost to Trump, not by the popular vote metric, but by the metric by which we actually elect presidents in this country, there was such a hangover effect that it looked, even though men have lost to men for decades and decades and decades, one woman losing once was enough to sort of psych out the electorate. And it's something that all of the women of 2020 then had to contend with.
Let's talk about how we get there. Based on what you've learned, what do you think it's going to take for the U.S. to finally elect a female president?
Just doing it. And I know that that sounds trivial and simple, but really, women are electable if you elect them. And I think that's the key part of this book, the idea that I flesh out in here, that there were so many voters who I talked to over the course of the campaign trail, and then studies and research being done on top of that, where candidates would lay out who their magic wand candidate was, the person who, if they had all the power in the world, that's who they would elect as their nominee in the 2020 Democratic primary. And in one poll that was done in real time during the campaign, Elizabeth Warren was the so-called magic wand candidate. But when voters in that same poll voted in the horse race, they picked Joe Biden. And when they were asked what the magic wand candidate could do to become the horse race candidate, they said that it was a function of gender. This is something that hung over the entire field, and something that Senator Warren talked with me about as we were flying from Iowa to New Hampshire on the night of that crazy Iowa caucus that really wasn't a very sustainable caucus at all. She said to me that she talks to voters, and she said, everyone says to me, I would vote for you if you had a penis. And in other conversations that I had with candidates from 2020, the general consensus was, because of how skittish the electorate was, because of how risk averse they were, they wanted someone who, frankly, was comfortable, was safe, was Joe Biden, both politically because he's a moderate, but also because he looks like almost everyone else who has had the job of president before. Those are just terms you couldn't apply to a female candidate, at least not yet.
So true. Allie, also quickly, before we let you go, I just want to know, how'd you do it? What was this like for you? I mean, obviously, it's not like you were taking time off or anything. We see you on our TVs almost every day. How'd you write a long book during that time?
I mean, look, the real answer to that question is that during those days of Build Back Better on the Hill in the fall and the winter, I was going home every night after leaving the Hill at 10 o'clock and then going home to write for 3 or 4 hours, just trying to pour all of this in. But look, truly the only way that I was able to get through that is, A, this is a real passion for me. This project, this goal of electing women to office, I think that reflective governance is a good aspiration for this country that will benefit more people. But also, you know, I love politics. I love my job. And frankly, I'm very lucky and grateful to have great friends and colleagues like you guys, but also my friends and colleagues outside of this NBC home who picked me up, they encouraged me, and I really wouldn't have been able to do it without any of that.
Well, you are very good at your job, and we are all lucky to get this book. Also, I like how we're both in electable red today, Allie.
I know, very on theme.
Allie Allie's book Electable is out now today in stores and online. Allie, thank you so much and congratulations. So exciting. We've been waiting a while for this.
Congratulations, Allie. All right, coming up, a major deadline for student loan borrowers.
Yeah, they haven't had to make payments since spring 2020 when the pandemic began, but the moratorium on student loans ends next week. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona joins us next with that and the latest on the teacher shortage after the break. Now to a growing list of back-to-school seasons thwarted by teacher strikes. This morning, educators in Ohio's largest district are manning picket lines.
Over in Philadelphia, thousands of custodians and bus drivers are following suit, all of them fed up with the same shortages and political pressures that are plaguing schools nationwide. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa joins us now with more on this. Maggie, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. You guys know this. We've covered it before. Those national teacher shortages now leading to larger class sizes in a profession with notoriously low pay. And then at the same time, teachers also dealing with cultural and political tensions kind of infiltrating classrooms. Well, cut to this week. This is peak back to school season, as you know, and now we're seeing teachers and staff in a growing number of districts reaching their breaking points. This morning, with back to school in full swing nationwide, teachers are testing districts by marking themselves absent.
There is no substitution for good and great teachers.
In Columbus, Ohio, the state's largest district, public school teachers are on strike for the first time in nearly 50 years. Their demands include smaller class sizes and air conditioning in every school. With classes set to start tomorrow, the district is scrambling to find substitutes.
Our community's children are the board's priority, and our final offer, we felt, did reflect that.
We are doing this for the students.
The Columbus clash, the latest classroom flashpoint. Over the weekend, roughly 2,000 custodial and transportation workers in Philadelphia public schools also voted to strike, demanding better pay and...
You all want active shooter training.
They're asking for the training that you'd think they'd be getting already.
A sobering stressor for modern teachers who also balance ever-changing COVID restrictions and soaring rates of anxiety among students. It's taking a toll, with an estimated 300,000 public school teachers and staff having left the field between February 2020 and May 2022. A recent NBC News poll finding just 25% of parents are confident public schools will be adequately staffed this year. In Columbus, after years of remote learning, mom Kristen McCormick worries how her first grader Ezra will feel when his teacher isn't in class Wednesday.
We have struggled as a family to maintain a sense of normalcy and a routine. So this is just sort of another log on the fire.
And of course, the key common complaint among teachers that we heard throughout the day yesterday is that notoriously low pay. So just to kind of put this in perspective, according to one study, public school teachers make on average 20% less than professionals in other fields with similar education and experience levels. Joe, Savannah, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Maggie, thank you so much.
We want to take a closer look at all those issues Maggie just laid out, as well as more. Joining us now is U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona. Secretary Cardona, thank you so much for your time and joining our program live this morning. We appreciate it. So, let's just dive in right there with what Maggie's report just showed. I think some people watch that and think, how did we get here? How is it possible that they're just asking for things like smaller class sizes and air conditioning? What needs to be done to meet teachers' needs and stop not only the mass exodus that's causing the shortage, but strikes?
Right. Well, listen, it is back to school season. So millions of students and families are excited about their first day of school, and educators across the country are too. But, I think the reporting that Maggie did just brings to the surface what the reality is out there. We still have, in many cases, conditions where, the class size might be high or the infrastructure of the building is not up to par. We want to make sure our students are going back to schools that are better, not only physically, but the programming. Our students have suffered a lot. So we want to make sure that this year is a better year. We have very strongly encouraged the use of the American Rescue Plan dollars, unprecedented funds, $130 billion across the country, to make sure that we're recruiting teachers, retaining teachers. It's not just about recruiting, it's about keeping them. Making sure we're paying bonuses where needed, bringing retired teachers back in without any penalty to their retirement benefits, and creating long-term strategies like grow your own programs. We have so many students. We need to tap them on the shoulder and help them believe that they are the next wave of teachers. So there's a lot of work to be done. However, this did not start with the pandemic. It was made worse by the pandemic. This has been an issue for many decades in education. We need to lift the profession as we give students opportunities and give them a better education than ever before.
Mr. Secretary, you just mentioned some of the ideas that have been floated to try to kind of fill some of these gaps. Another one that we're seeing in some school districts is really the requirements shifting to become a teacher, looking at recruiting people from other fields. For example, in Florida, they're looking at veterans to help fill this gap. You know, we've heard on both sides of this issue, people who think, great, we can get, you know, responsible people in these classrooms. We're also hearing from some teachers who think, it's harder than you'd think. What do you think of these plans to find alternate teachers from paths that don't just include going to school to become a teacher?
You know, when I was a school principal, I often recruited folks who had teaching as their second profession. They might have come from a different sector, but those folks had to have had the training, adequate training, and professional development to be a certified teacher. This is not a hobby. This is a profession. And I think if your first strategy is to lower standards to a profession that's already getting disrespected, then you're part of the problem. Let's face it. That doesn't mean we don't find creative solutions. We don't work with universities. In fact, we need to work with our universities to make sure that they're being malleable as well, to make sure teacher preparation programs are flexible to meet the needs of the community. But lowering standards for students, lowering standards for teacher qualifications at a time when students need more, when academically they're behind, when socially and emotionally they need support, lowering standards to become teachers is not the right strategy. If anything, we need to help our teachers have the professional development that they need to meet the students with the greater demand they're entering our classrooms with.
And what would you say to a parent in a district like that whose child is essentially looking at a really large class size, or someone who wasn't trained to be a teacher? What would you tell a parent?
You know, I would tell parents what I'm telling parents across the country. This year, I want to see more parents engage in authentic engagement with their schools. I think, you know, if we're talking about lifting the teaching profession, it's all hands on deck. Who better than parents to talk about what the needs of their children are and how the school needs to meet their needs? And I think, you know, when parents speak, folks listen, and it's really important that we engage in communication with our local boards, with our leaders to say, yes, we need more support in our schools. You have more money than ever before, but we shouldn't be lowering our standards. Our kids need more, not less.
Mr. Secretary, let's switch gears to another issue that's on a lot of people's minds, not just parents, and that's student loans. A pause on student loan repayments is set to expire next week. CNN is reporting the White House is considering forgiving up to $10,000 worth of loans for people who earn less than $125,000. So first of all, is that the number, 10,000? Can you confirm that?
No, there's no news to share today. I did read that report too, but look, there's nothing to announce today. What I will tell you is that when a decision is made, I know the president will be speaking directly to the people across America who are waiting to hear. It's not something that I am prepared to announce today, and I know there's a lot of speculation because it is on the mind of many people. What I am proud of is that from day one till now, over $32 billion in loan forgiveness has been provided. But equally as important, it doesn't get as much attention, but equally as important, we're fixing a broken system that got us to this mess that we're in now. We're fixing a broken system so that 5 years from now, we're not in the same position. We're definitely keeping our borrowers front and center and our students front and center. We're going to continue to do that.
Not today, but the deadline is quickly approaching. Do you think the president's going to do something about it this week?
Well, with regard to the pause, without question, the 31st is coming up very quickly, and borrowers need to know. So I anticipate that there's going to be information about that before the 31st, obviously, but nothing to share with you right now.
All right. I mean, there are millions of Americans out there who are trying to plan budgets for the fall. Right. Inflation's high. They're feeling kind of stuck right now. What is your message to those who are worried about this, waiting for an answer, and also, you know, think the numbers should be higher, maybe up to $50,000?
Let me tell you, from day one, this president's been about substance, not sensationalism. Look at the track record. Look at what has been done. $32 billion in 1.5 years is more than any other administration combined. And we're going to continue with that mentality of keeping our borrowers front and center, keeping our students front and center in every decision that we make. We don't take this lightly. I would tell folks who are listening, check out public service loan forgiveness. You might be eligible today. Studentaid.gov. We are fighting hard for our students. We want to make sure higher education is accessible. And we know education is the great equalizer. The president has run on this, and he's leading this way. And we're going to continue to push forward to make sure that higher education is accessible to more Americans across our country.
Mr. Secretary, we have less than a minute here, but I really want to ask you, you've been outspoken about Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay bill, saying you were deeply disheartened by it, that your Office of Civil Rights stands ready for anyone who feels they're facing discrimination, that they can file a complaint. First, have you received any complaints yet?
You know, I have to refer to my Assistant Secretary for OCR about whether or not complaints have come in specifically from Florida on this issue. But I'll reiterate what I said before. No student in this country should feel like they don't belong in a public school. That's unacceptable. That's un-American. And we're going to make sure that all students, regardless of whatever circumstance, whatever background they have, that they feel welcome. Our students need more support as we come back from this pandemic. They don't need less. And we have to make sure that our leaders are held accountable to making sure our schools are inclusive. That's what we're going to fight for, and that's what our students and families deserve.
Secretary Miguel Cardona, thanks so much for joining us this morning and answering so many questions. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we do appreciate it. Good to see you again, Secretary. Thank you. Bye-bye. Coming up, a group of pilots are going to new heights to save animals in need.
We're going to introduce you to the organization flying animals across the country, helping them find their forever homes. You're watching Morning News Now.
Finally, this hour, a nonprofit is going to new heights to help animals in need.
In honor of National Dog Month, I visited the group called Pilots to the Rescue as they fly across the country to save animals from being euthanized.
Here we go.
They took off from New York in a small jet, flying 1,500 miles with 2 pilots and not a single passenger on board.
Here we are flying into Beaumont, Texas.
But they knew they would not return empty-handed.
There you go.
That their hands would soon be full of paws.
You're a good girl.
26 dogs, most of them puppies, were waiting here in Beaumont, Texas. All of them rescues.
You ready for your flight?
Including Scarlett and her babies, discovered behind a house.
If we didn't step in, she would probably have been euthanized due to space at the shelter.
Now, thanks to the nonprofit Pilots to the Rescue, these dogs are heading to the East Coast.
The faster that we can get them out there, the faster they can be adopted.
Michael Schneider is the group's top dog.
When I started Pilots to Rescue back in 2015, I was searching for something. I was searching for a sense of purpose.
That purpose? Developing a network of trained volunteer pilots who fly around the country picking up endangered animals. The need is great. In America, nearly 1 million dogs and cats are euthanized every year. When you get to these locations and see these pets, what goes through your mind?
What goes through my mind is I'm doing great work and I'm saving these animals' lives. And one thing I realized doing this work is a lot of times the animals save us.
During the pandemic, when Michael's corporate events job drastically slowed down, he turned the nonprofit into a full-time gig.
So it took me 45 years to realize what I wanted to do when I grow up. This is a real passion of mine. And it gives me such a sense of fulfillment. And I love doing this work. It's tremendous.
On this trip, he's getting help from Victor Gergenti, a fellow pilot who's donating his plane and his skills. Victor figures this flight is costing at least $4,000. Boeing pitched in to help with some of the expenses this time. Usually, it comes out of his pocket.
You know, everybody says it's better to give than receive. Well, until you do a dog animal rescue mission, you have no idea how much better it is to give than receive.
Come on, Molly. You're flying first class.
Finally, it's time to load up the pups. Getting all the crates to fit is like a game of Tetris.
It's packed in there.
But before you know it, they're skyward.
Here's the clouds at 17,000 feet.
The view from the cockpit topped only by the sight behind it.
They're all sleeping. Mama and her pups.
The dogs just seem to know they're flying toward a better life.
You're a good passenger, as we say. Good passenger.
When they land, volunteers with Amazing Mutt's Puppy Rescue are waiting.
I will be taking 6 home with me.
Ready to care for the canines and find them new homes.
This is the baby. She's the runt. This one.
For Scarlett and her babies, now firmly on the ground, things are finally looking up.
Many times I've saved the families too, because they say they're the best part of their lives, you know, they're their best friends. That kind of energy that comes back to you is priceless. And that's really why I do this work.
Michael says the group has rescued more than 1,200 animals. They've even saved some endangered wolves, sea turtles, foxes, and more. He hopes to keep growing more pilots, more planes, and of course, more money to make the missions possible.
Oh my
Cool.
gosh, turtles.
Good for them, yeah. A little bit of everything.
Amazing. Oh, well, then that's not a passenger. I wonder what that is. So cute.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.